Okay, so we're going to shift gears a little bit, get a little more up to date, but I want to talk about the power of images, because our culture is really moving from a written culture to an image culture, and that's how a lot of communication is done today. And images, of course, one of the most powerful communication tools that there is. That's why we have a proverb that a picture is worth 1,000 words. And the powers that have run this evil world have long understood the power of images. And the Ten Commandments provides prohibitions against the making of images because they can capture your heart. And the Jews were taken with the nations around them because of the images that those nations put forward. Ezekiel 23:14, and it's talking about Israel here. And she increased her whoredoms, for when she saw men portrayed upon the wall, the images of the Chaldeans portrayed with vermilion, girded with girdles upon their loins, as soon as she saw them with her eyes, she doted upon them and sent messengers unto them in Chaldea. And the Babylonians came to her into the bed of love, and they defiled her with their whoredom, and she was polluted with them, and her mind was alienated from them. And you see the kind of image there on the right that we're talking about. You can go today to the University of Chicago's Oriental Institute, and they actually have the things that were in the Middle East over there that the Israelites saw. They have them on display. These displays of power and wealth and glory that captured the hearts of God's people and carried them away. And it angered God. And you come right down through the Renaissance and you see imaging used to preach and teach and propagandize. Here's a picture that was painted of supposedly of Peter and the Pope kneeling before him because he's the successor of Peter and some wealthy patron there or priest. And who controlled the images down through the ages? Well, the world, the power brokers and the kings and the popes. And images, back when not a lot of people could read, the church used, and I use the church loosely, used images to communicate. And even with all the technology that we have, I really feel like we're heading into a new dark age as far as communication. We live in an age of tremendous ignorance. It masquerades as knowledge. Children are taught foolish things from birth, like evolution. And I am finding that young people really don't have the ability to process truth. They're not being taught truth, and they don't really understand how to put things together, and that's not surprising. And so they are shut out of understanding important issues because they're just emojified and they're dumbed down. And they are increasingly inept at basic life skills, like we talked about at the first part of this. Not being raised where they have to do any serious work, and they're out crusading around today for socialism and gun control. They don't understand what they're talking about. They don't understand what they're promoting. Just like the Vietnam hippie generation promoting free love. You don't know what you're doing. You don't know what you're doing to your society. And so they're very ignorant. And they get much of their information through images, less and less by reading. I think we see that. And they communicate with pictures and memes and GIFs, and lots less by talking and writing and communicating in real ways. And if you don't believe that, just read the average writing of a typical high schooler today. We are shocked. Laura and I invariably are shocked at how poorly they communicate, how poorly they write, how poorly they talk. They don't have a great command of the language. And that's just because of the society we live in today. Well, images. Have you ever seen something you couldn't forget? How often has that happened? And images have the power to absorb us, and the Bible has a lot of warnings about what we take in with our eyes. Psalm 101:3, I will set no wicked thing before mine eyes. I hate the work of them that turn aside. It shall not cleave to me. I will set no wicked thing before my eyes. That's the plea there. And this little picture is a scene from one of our favorite cartoons of Pilgrim's Progress. It's called Dangerous Journey, and it's Christian and hopeful passing through the town of Vanity Fair and they're turning up their collars so that the things of this world won't allure them. That really ought to be our attitude. The Bible says that hell and destruction are never full, so the eyes of man are never satisfied. Let thine eyes look right on, and let thine eyelids look straight before thee. Don't look to the left and to the right. Don't be allured by the things that the devil is offering. That's hard to do in this world. We must carefully guard our eyes. The Bible says the light of the body is the eye. If the eye therefore be single, thy whole body shall be full of light. What we put into our eye and into our minds and hearts is what our life is going to manifest. The Bible says, out of the abundance of the heart, the mouth speaketh. And after talking with somebody a pretty short period of time, you can kind of find out what's driving them, what they're interested in, what they're doing with their life. And the Bible says that our eyes even have the potential to affect our eternity. If thine eye offend thee, pluck it out and cast it from thee. It's better to enter into life with one eye than to have two eyes and be cast into hell. And let's think about how imaging technology has changed in the last couple of hundred years and its power to influence us. 200 years ago, the best you could do was to be to paint or sculpt a depiction of reality. That's all you could do. And then photography came along in the mid-1800s. The Civil War is well documented with photographs. New technology there, but it was a two-dimensional form. There was one picture. It was not easy to reproduce that one picture. They couldn't even print them in the newspaper back then. And so there was one picture and that was it. In 200 years, though, we've gone from depicting reality through painting or art to capturing reality through photography to today we are creating reality. And that image that you see there, there's nothing real about that. Nothing real, but it looks real. and we are creating our own reality. And that has tremendous power to affect the mind. And it's not unusual today for a big budget movie that combines the most talented people that Hollywood has to offer. And then they get a budget of $250 million. You know what you can do with $250 million and a bunch of talented people? You can do a lot. Combining the smartest people and the most talented people in this industry, giving them unlimited money and resources, fantastic technology that exists today, and you have the gaming industries and the movie industries that we have today. Tremendous power to influence you and to affect your life. Many people simply cannot look away. You think because the power is so unbelievable, you just can't look away, and they're drawn into it, and the word we've used over and over, they're captivated by it. They're taken captive by it. And especially true for a child or a young person. They don't have the life experience to be able to make choices. And if you're not well trained, even as a Christian, you don't make the choices you need to make. And so somebody needs to make that choice for them. One of the most shocking things to me in researching this was how far video games have gone. A lot of these games today have fully realized sex scenes. I mean, they're out and out pornography. They're sold and they're mature. Who's stopping most kids from playing this stuff? Nobody. Nobody's watching them. And very realistic. You know, this is a show, this is a presentation about the media. I've used very few media clips in this because I just don't see much value in bringing a lot of that stuff in here. I've used a little bit because I think you need some perspective. This is I'll show you a clip from King Kong from the 30s to King Kong today. Heavy rock song, We've Got to Get Out of This Place from the 60s. And watching just the trailer for that, for a guy, for me, man, it produces a lot of powerful effects in you. It makes you highly aggressive and your blood pressure rises and your heartbeat increases. I get agitated. After I've watched something like that, I'm just on edge. And the media makers today can literally create whole worlds that don't exist and take you there. And they're very powerful places. And we just really need to be careful about entering into this sort of stuff. Missionary friend John Cloud, who y'all probably know from when he was here, he left here last year or whatever. He's made a lot of videos, and he's worked with me on some video. He calls these things mind shapers because of the countless hours of work and financial backing and intelligence that goes into making them. 1 hour of a movie can have the effect of multiplied hours of scripture study because of their hyper-refined content. They can actually erase multiplied hours of scripture study because they're just so powerful. And we've talked a little bit here about the power of images, but what happens when you start combining these images with other elements? You ramp up the power of that stuff exponentially. Let's add the rest of the elements of a modern $250 million movie just to kind of break it down and see what we're talking about. First, you start with these powerful images that for a kid, you just are immediately drawn into that. And then you add a fantastic storyline where nothing is impossible. Next to that, you add in a driving music soundtrack. We've already talked about the power of music and how it can influence you and move you in ways that are not right. And a lot of these movies use either rock music or what they would call epic music. I'll play you a little bit right here. It's not really rock, but it's powerful music. And so you add those things together, and then here's the kicker. You add a sexual element, a superhero girl in a skin-tight leotard or something like that. And I'm going to tell you, guys are deeply affected by that. You put your kid in front of a superhero movie, you're very foolish, because guys, well, I just take my word for it, deeply affected by it. And on top of all this, you have very intense action and violence. That's a very powerful cocktail to be feeding to an adolescent kid, especially a guy. And don't forget adolescent guys. The following comment here was posted by a millennial age missionary serving on the field after he watched the trailer for a recent superhero movie. He said, "I just salivated on my keyboard and wet my pants at the same time." That's a missionary who's out in the field serving the Lord. When you say, well, what's wrong with that? See, he can watch superhero movies if he wants to. Well, he hadn't seen the movie. He's just watched the trailer. He doesn't know how much profanity's in it. He doesn't know how much sex is in it. He doesn't know how much inappropriate material in it. But yet he has pre-endorsed that to every single person that he's trying to win to the Lord, that's coming to his church, that he's got influence in their lives. Is that right? I don't think it's right. And what I see today is that Facebook and all these other social media outlets are filled up with young fundamentalists who know a lot more about Star Wars than they do about separation. I just see that today. And that's a bad place to be for us. Brother Cloud said that the superhero craze even extends to the backwaters of Nepal where he is. He said he said a lot more. I pulled one quote. He said one of our Bible college students was so caught up in superhero movies before he got saved that he wanted to be Spider-Man. What kind of a aspiration is that anyway? It's like these kids down in the projects, they all want to be a pro basketball player. Wrong, not going to happen. This is a foolish aspiration. Somebody needs to get you down on earth and get you going in a direction something that's going to actually be useful in your life. And here's one of the major dangers to me. All of this stuff is highly sexualized. Highly sexualized. I looked up, I was going to bring in some pictures of some of these conventions. I couldn't find any. This is the most decent picture I could find to bring in here. And if you look at the pictures from these conventions and all that's going on in this superhero craze that's out there right now, and these fantasy movies, you'll figure out why the boys are there. Why are these things so popular? And I'm just talking about one form of media right now, because they are a nuclear bomb of communication and imaging, and they capture your mind and they'll grab your heart like music did to me. They just sweep you away with this, and it's dangerous. They're an out-and-out attack on your spiritual life, I believe. They are the opposite of spirituality in every way. God says, be still. But this world is being tossed about. And we're going to go through some things here. The world is described as raging. We're supposed to be settled. And the Bible uses the concepts of loud and quiet to distinguish between spirituality and carnality. The foolish woman in Proverbs 9 is clamorous. She's loud and brash and noisy. When I was lost, I was loud and brash and noisy. And getting saved has calmed me down and quieted me down quite a bit. Deceivers and apostates in the church are depicted as raging waves of the sea, foaming out their own shame. The world is loud and clamorous and boisterous. That's the world. The wicked are like the troubled sea when it cannot rest, whose waters cast up mire and dirt. There is no peace, saith my God, to the wicked. These things they stir up fleshly lust that the Bible says war against our soul. But the spiritual man or woman, he is to be quiet, settled, at peace. Moses was called the meekest man on earth. Peter says that we ought to let it be the hidden man of the heart, in which is not corruptible, even the ornament of a meek and quiet spirit. That's what we ought to be cultivating and developing. The wisdom from above is pure, peaceable, gentle, easy to be entreated. God Himself spoke in a still, small voice. And these things are not called action movies for nothing. And what happens when you subject yourself to 2 hours of head-banging music and action and violence and sexuality? I mean, it just changes your spirit. It changes your spirit. And you're not ready for prayer. When you come out of that, when you've subjected yourself to that, it changes your spirit. I know, I've done it. And it creates turmoil. And I think this is the most important slide in the entire presentation here. If you feed your children a diet of this material, you may be feeding them the very thing that will captivate their heart and take them away from the Lord forever. It has that kind of power behind it. It just does. Well, let's talk a little bit about, this is such a broad topic, so many things going on in so many different directions with the media. All I could do was focus on a few different ones. But I want to talk about witchcraft, because I think it's a very important thing that's going on in the media today. If you think about the major themes of literature down through the ages, I think that you could break them down into 3 major categories. Of course, there'd be more than this, but these are the major ones. War and adventure. You go to the library today, I bet half the books in the library have something to do with war, its aftermath, the results of it, the way nations have changed. I mean, it's a big topic of the world. Or adventure. Love and romance, of course, that's always going to be a big theme. But the supernatural has also always been a big thing that has occupied men's minds. That would include religion, gods, witches, mythology, ghosts, supernatural topics of every type. And we still see a lot of movies and literature and television on war and adventure and love and romance, but where have the gods gone? Well, I think that science fiction and fantasy is filling that void. I think that's where that desire of man is being fulfilled. And John Lennon wrote the theme for the world that man likes. It's an atheistic theme. Imagine there's no heaven, it's easy if you try, no hell below us, above us, only sky. That's the world John Lennon wanted. That's the world men want today. And in ancient literature, you could only throw bolts of lightning if you were a god. You could only fly if you were a witch. Even in pagan literature, there was an understanding of the concepts of good and evil, which they got from the one true God. If you do any kind of research at all and you go back, you'll find that everything man knows about anything always goes all the way back to God. Language, it doesn't matter what it is. And there's no shortage of material coming out today with supernatural or science fiction things, but it takes place in a world with no God. That's why I quoted the John Lennon song. That's the kind of world he wanted. That's the kind of world you find on television and in movies and in games today, a world with no God. Everybody does what they want to do by situational ethics. They just act like there's no God. And in truth, there is no God in the world they create for themselves. And this business of supernatural fantasy stuff as entertainment is really a very recent development. It wasn't until the 1800s that you begin to see anything like a book like this written just purely for entertainment. Edgar Allan Poe wrote the first horror stories. Bram Stoker wrote Dracula about a vampire. It wasn't until 1933 that you have anything like a werewolf book. And this is all about the same time that Darwin's theories began to undermine a supernatural worldview. So therefore, supernatural stories move from reality-based, there really are gods, there really are demons, there really are witches, to we'll just use these tropes for entertainment. And today, magic, sorcery, witchcraft are major themes of many of the television shows that are out there today. I don't think Disney's ever made anything that didn't have some kind of witchcraft in it. That's just part and parcel of what they do. And if you don't know God's mind about witchcraft and sorcery, you don't have to look hard in Scripture. Lots of references about it, very serious references. God hates that stuff. And God judged Saul very harshly for visiting the witch of Endor. But somehow or other, we think we can sit around and indulge these things and enjoy them, and God doesn't have any opinion about it, that He will allow that for us as entertainment. And I don't think that's so. And I don't know if you ever caught this. One of my favorite shows as a Southern Baptist kid growing up was Bewitched. And Samantha's mother was Endora. Nothing to see here. And I was 17 years old and lost when the first Star Wars movie came out. And I was completely swept away by that movie. I was captivated by it. And so powerful. And people today, it's been 40 years ago, still living their lives enthralled, carried about by this science fiction movie. And to have the Force there, this supernatural element, was a great stroke of genius by the world. And I don't watch Star Wars today. I'm not going to watch Star Wars today. They are just way too seductive on too many levels. That's a conscious decision I've made. You know, would I like to watch it? Yes. I like this stuff. My flesh likes this stuff. My flesh likes rock music. I don't listen to rock music. I'm just not going to do it. I believe it's offensive to my God. And I have observed that those who give themselves over to this are in danger of being taken captive by it. And they just, they're captivated by a fantasy and they're swept up in it and carried along with these things. And as I mentioned just a few slides ago, many fundamental Baptists don't see any problem with it. They indulge it. And I think it's very dangerous. And I think it goes hand in hand with the warning we saw from the 1886 conference that we are the apostasy. And if you want to understand the power of these things, just consider these conventions that have grown up around all this fantasy material. You don't see cowboy movies conventions, you don't see love story conventions, but you definitely see fantasy movie conventions because people just want to live in that world. They want to live in that world. They don't want to live in this world. They want to live in that fantasy world with no God, where they can fly around and nobody to tell them what to do. Just a few of the conventions that are going on today, and every city has them. They have them here in Huntsville, and you just go and indulge all this stuff. 1940s, our young people were fighting and defeating Nazi Germany. We were very serious in that day. Today we're playing dress up. That's the generation today. Just a bunch of foolishness that they live by. Cartoons. This is the crowd from one of the fantasy conventions here. Idiots. they're just totally consumed by this stuff. What is this? I mean, is this something to give your life to? And the supernatural element has really come to dominate a lot of the media today, and I don't even think we're really fully aware of it. You look at how things have changed in the last 50 years just on television. Prime time, 50 years ago, Walt Disney, Gentle Ben, Ed Sullivan, Smothers Brothers, Lucy Show. There's only 2 shows on there that have any supernatural element at all. I Dream of Jeannie and Bewitched. And those were comedy shows. Not that excuses it, but I'm just saying they've come a long way today. They are very realistic. They are very much geared towards pushing people towards the reality of that stuff. And but what's on today? Game of Thrones contains nudity, witchcraft, on-screen sex, violence. I am going to read some reviews by teenagers who watch these things. You can go to commonsensemedia.org and read review after review after review by teenagers. And I think their testimonies are very telling. I was slightly disturbed by the amount of unnecessary graphic sex in the show, but due to my interest in the plot, I just pushed it aside and took it as part of the story. Well, I made it about to the 7th episode in the first season until I came to the conclusion that perhaps I shouldn't be watching Game of Thrones. I found that the excessive sex and violence in the show was desensitizing me, thinking to myself, I'm only 17, why am I exposing myself to this? And, kids are not monitored today whatsoever. They have free, open access to any of these things that they want to have. Here's a 16-year-old. This is an adult show. This show has lots of rape, graphic sex scenes, death, decapitation, blood, and gore. Wouldn't recommend to children. Let them keep their innocence, said this 16-year-old a little while longer. Who's keeping your innocence? Here's a show called Lucifer on Fox. Contains orgies, drug use, language, violence. Here's a 14-year-old. Lots of blood and satanic rituals. Despite the above, I think that Lucifer has many positive messages and role models for anyone 13 and older to enjoy. Supernatural. Contains sex, language, ghosts, demons, witches. Here's a 17-year-old. I've been watching this since season 2, which was airing when I was 11 to 12. Honestly, Supernatural changed me for the better. The mythology of the show inspired me to learn more about other cultures and religions. This is one of my many guilty pleasures. I love it. I am most likely too young to be watching it, but as I said, guilty pleasures. That's the generation that's coming. We thought the hippie generation was bad. Vampire Diaries. I don't remember much, but what I do remember was because it was so disgusting. The images have been burned in my mind. I was 11. The last 30 seconds were basically disturbing adult video material, and that's why I've never watched the show again, even 2 years after. Even these kids understand, this is warping my brain. A kid. Well, where were the parents? I honestly love this show. It's my favorite TV show of all time. I can't stop watching it. I'm madly addicted to it, madly obsessed with vampires. I would say it's better than any other vampire show because at the same time it does have some mature stuff, but it is also appropriate. And it's not just fantasy and the supernatural that we're worrying about. There are dark themes on every corner. Last year, Alan and Jamie had a good friend whose 13-year-old daughter committed suicide in the bathtub of their home in Birmingham. After she died, she took a gun, got in the bathtub, and blew her brains out while nobody else was at home. 13, wasn't she 13? 13 years old? 14. And she had watched 13 Reasons Why. Her parents didn't even know the show existed, but she had a cell phone, had a Netflix account, and didn't even know she had watched the show. She binge watched the whole thing, killed herself. You think this stuff's not powerful? Huh?
She mimicked the way...
Yeah. And by every account, before she watched this show, bright girl, engaged, but completely swept away by the images, the imaging of that series. And this family has been destroyed through their own ignorance. And I'm not blaming them. It is so easy for your kid to be involved in something. You have no idea what they're doing. It's not their fault, and maybe some way it is, but yet it could happen to anybody in this day and age because this stuff's everywhere. Had they not given her a phone, the friend at school would have. It's just not, you can't put up a hedge around everything. And these producers that made this show, they don't care one whit that this girl's killed herself. They're going around and excusing many suicides. And the way they do this, they talk about we need to have a conversation about this. And this show explores themes. You don't have to explore themes of sin. You shouldn't. But that's how they excuse it, and they're making their buck, and they're going to move on. Let's talk about gaming a little bit. Lots of dangers in gaming. We are looking, of course, at the spiritual dangers involved, but even the world recognizes that there's hazards in this stuff. Now, they won't admit what we admit. I read a book last year called Man Interrupted, which deals with the fact that young men are having their lives completely altered by the things that are available to them through gaming and the internet. And what's happening, according to the authors, they have an addiction to video games and online porn, which creates a young man who's shy and socially awkward, emotionally removed. He's risk averse. He doesn't want to risk anything. And he doesn't know how to navigate. See, young women are wanting to have a life. They're wanting to get married. They're wanting to have a career. They're wanting a man that's got a career. They're wanting to raise children. And these guys are over here not developing and not moving on in society with the women. And so it's creating this vacuum of women who can't find a guy that's got anything together in his life. And he's getting all of his satisfaction. He's a hero in his video game, and he's got a more beautiful gal at his disposal through pornography than he's ever going to get wherever at work. And so he's getting all of his satisfaction through these outlets. And everything about their lives is a fantasy. That's where they live. That's where they dwell. Today, video gamers are spending 3 billion hours a week in front of their screens. And the video game sales continue to increase through the roof. The top best 3 selling games of 2016 were Call of Duty, Battlefield 1, and Grand Theft Auto. There is a phenomenon that they have termed internet gaming disorder. And in gaming addicts, there are functional and structural alterations in the neural reward system, a group of structures associated with feeling pleasure, learning, and motivation. And exposing video game addicts to game-related cues that cause cravings and monitoring their brain responses highlighted these changes that are seen in other addictive disorders. So it has many similarities to other things that you can be addicted to. And if these things can affect your daily work life, can they not also affect your spiritual life? Absolutely. To me, one of the greatest dangers of any of this is that you are simulating sin. In most of these games, you're simulating sin. What's murder? It's sin. And if that's the object of the game is to kill other people over and over and over, is that spiritual? Is that where a Christian ought to be? And, it's very natural for a 10-year-old boy to run through the woods with a stick. I don't believe that ever hurt anybody. You're mimicking what adults do when they go to war. You are just emulating what you know adults will do. I don't believe that hurts anybody. But you're sitting at a console and you're violently blowing people's heads off in a very realistic way. That's not the same thing. That is not the same thing at all. And how many school shooters and mass killers? Now, the world rolls its eyes when you say that this one leads to the other. They absolutely roll their eyes. Laura heard a game developer, a young girl who writes game code, on NPR last week, and she said that the gaming industry does a collective eye roll when somebody suggests that these two things are related. They are related. If they're not related, advertising has no function. You know, people spend billions of hours to put a 30-second message in front of you, billions of dollars every year to put a 30-second message in front of you, and you're telling me thousands of hours in front of a console is not programming what you think? It absolutely is. Adam Lanza had 83,000 online kills before he opened fire at Sandy Hook. Now, I bet you if you did a research on this, you would find that all of these school shooters, every one of them, almost to a man, was involved in gaming. Pokemon even. I mean, these innocent child's games are not innocent. The main characters are headstrong, stubborn, quibbling, hormonal, have a fascination with trying to score with the opposite sex, cross-dressing. Pokemon promotes the search for occultic power. You get energy cards and the players engage in pretend occultic warfare. Two of the characters are called Abra and Kadabra. Abra card promotes the ability to read minds. The Kadabra character has a pentagram on his forehead. Well, let's talk, I wish we had more time on some of this stuff. All we can do is kind of hit some high notes, but cell phones. There are a lot of dangers in cell phones, and to list the apps, I would look like an idiot if I stood up here and started talking about an app, a collection of apps in front of the average 16, because they'd be like, that was last week, you know. Really? I mean, right? You know, I don't know what I'm talking about because it changes all the time, and they know what's in, and they ain't telling you, right? So there's too many dangers to list, but I'll just give you a few things to think about. There are apps which provide forums for sexting, hooking up, bullying, sharing porn. This is all for kids. They're doing it. There's an app out now called Down, the secret way to get down with people nearby. If you want to hook up, say so. That's what kids are up to. Omegle. I was going to bring in a screen grab from this. Couldn't find any that were suitable. Many videos exist of users standing nude in front of their camera to surprise or shock the stranger on the other end. You sign on to this, and it pairs you up with a stranger. And then you can share images, pictures, you have conversations with strangers, you show them you, and they'll show you them, and that's what's going on. Wholesale. Snapchat is not just sexting, but there's a lot of that's what the main use of that is. Your kid doesn't need to have Snapchat for any purpose. And any cell phone that you're paying for ought to be open season anytime. Hand me that phone, I'm looking at it. Tinder, used for dating, hookups. Audio Manager, it's an app hiding app. You get Audio Manager, you can hide the apps you want to hide in the Audio Manager. So it looks like, oh, that's Audio Manager, that controls. No, it doesn't. And there's a lot of those kind of apps. Calculator, you can hide things in Calculator. Your mom looks at it and you thinks, oh, it's a calculator. It's not a calculator. It's a hider app. And Vaulty, this one, if your parent tries to break into it by the code, it'll take a picture of them so you know who was trying to get into your vault. All this stuff's going on. And then selfies. This know also that in the last days perilous times shall come, for men shall be lovers of their own selves. Is that not what selfies are? What a ridiculous. But now I don't mind taking a picture of myself at Niagara Falls. That's one thing. But, you know, that's something else. And just the vanity of people that just incessantly post selfies over and over. Men shall be lovers of their own selves. That's what it is. And the iPhone has enabled more foolish vanity than anything else ever invented. There's no doubt about it. Well, one of the great hazards of all of this stuff is how much time they suck out of your life. And we are to redeem the time, not squander the time. And that's what these things do. And you don't have to look too hard to find statistics about this. This just demonstrates what a little supervision can do even. White kids, this study showed, spend 8.5 hours a day looking at a screen. Minority kids spend 13, generally going to be less supervised, I guess, in some regards. G.D. Watson, others said, Methodists said a long time back, just talking about how we use our time. He said, the Holy Spirit will put a strict watch on you and with a jealous love rebuke you for careless words and feelings or for wasting your time, which other Christians never seem distressed over. And he's just talking about if you really want to serve the Lord will get a hold of you about these things. Has a negative effect on weight and just your whole physical outlook there. They can spend multiplied hours at a stretch with these games. We don't have time to delve into all of this, but you understand. When you're playing these games, you're developing taste for things that are going to carry you away from spiritual things. They just will. Well, zeitgeist, the defining spirit or mood of a particular period of history as shown by the ideas and beliefs of the time. What kind of zeitgeist is going on today? Well, the spirit of our age is just out and out rebellion against God, and it's being brought into our homes every day through the media. It's readily available, corrupting this generation, and it's a generation that rages against God. So what's the answer? Let me run through these. There are answers to this, and I kind of wish I'd sped this up a little bit. But authoritative parenting, I believe in this. You don't budge, no matter how many tears, how much crying, how much temper tantrum. I'm going to move out. Move. I'm not moving. You move. That's the mindset you have to have. And too often, I see parents who are afraid their kid is going to move out, and so they live in fear of their kid. And John Ross was just telling us the other day about how his daddy raised him, telling him, hey, it's my house. You don't like it? You ain't going to follow the rules? Out. That's the way you have to be. You have to be in charge, and you can't live in fear of your kid. If you live in fear of them, you've lost the war already. You got to be committed to what's right regardless of what your kid, you're the adult. I believe this. Are you willing to go with the Lord even if your kids don't come with you? That's a decision you got to settle today, here, now. And having that mindset is critical if you're going to see the Lord, see your kids serve the Lord in truth. You see, you represent God in their lives, and God kills people. I'm just saying, if they don't know that life and death is involved in this by the way you act about it, that nobody's ever going to be able to teach them this. This is the only chance they're going to have to find out life and death is involved in this. And there are some serious repercussions if I don't follow the Lord. And I can speak to this because we've done it. Libby got to the point of rebellion in her life that she wouldn't listen to us, and we said, you can't live here. That was a hard thing to do. But it served her well because she understood that there's a line you can cross. That's important. Kids will test your commitment to the Lord and who you're going to choose, and your commitment to the Lord is going to be your lasting testimony to your children. And if you fold because your children made an issue about something, my parents don't, there's nothing in my parents' lives that they'll die for. What will they die for? Nothing. They gave in to me. I just believe it. But our belief about that is if your kid does leave, they need to be able to find you right where they left you, serving the Lord and doing right. And that's our position. Our friend Ron Williams said, your kids ought to think you're the meanest parent in the world. And I'm going to jump over that. Integrity and consistency. Those are the greatest gifts I believe you can give to your child. If you are consistent, you are just teaching in a way that you are communicating in a way that's very important. Hypocrisy is the opposite of this, and it is a killer. If you're a hypocrite about these things, you are contradicting everything you're trying to teach. Behold, thou desirest truth in the inward parts, and in the hidden part thou shalt make me to know wisdom. Now, my dad was not a deeply spiritual man, but he meant business. And he taught me that, and I appreciate him for that. Buddy, I wasn't moving him, he was moving me. That's just the way it was. And if I had some idea that I was promoting that he wasn't in agreement with, We were going His way. And that's just how you have to be, and I thank Him for that. That was very important to me. It's bearing fruit in my life today, that I've just got a mindset of I'm the one that makes the rules. And vigilance, man, this is very important. Monitoring media is going to require a lot of vigilance, and you're not going to be able to give a kid a tool that's that powerful and not try to keep up with it somewhat. But instead of vigilance, I see a lot of abdication. I tried to tell a parent one time something that I'd seen their kid post online. I thought it'd be a help to them. Hey, I saw your kid post this. I don't look at social media. Okay. Got my answer about that. You don't care. You don't want to know. You are content to let them do whatever it is they're going to do. And that's not parenting. That's babysitting. Just say no. Don't be afraid to eliminate any media of any kind, any tool of any kind, whether it be a smartphone or a game machine or whatever else. We sing the song, Nothing Between, even with much self-denial. What happened to self-denial among Christians? Why do we think we have to have everything that the world has? We don't. We don't have to have everything that the world has. And we got to be willing to be a bit of an oddball in this world. Stand apart from everyone, even fellow church members. If you're living the Christian life, you can be lonely even in a place like this. You're going to be a little bit different than the mainstream. But the Lord says that we are strangers and pilgrims at this earth, and that this is not a new story. The people that have been following the Lord in truth have always been going against the flow. I heard somebody one time say that the Christian life is not 3 or 4 abreast. It's one way out in front of you, one way behind you. It's kind of a lonely walk. And develop habits that are positive. Train to be a reader, not a watcher. And I don't mean vampire books. Time spent with quality books expands your intellect. It sharpens you. Entertainment, where you just disengage and mindlessly watch something, dulls you. And Pastor Allison says, we have not fully considered the implications of putting a device in every child's hand, but we're seeing the fruit of it, and we're going to be seeing the fruit of it for a long time. Don't really think you want to live in the world that's coming down the pike. It's already rough. Good preachers have always warned about the need to stand against culture and stand against the things that are coming down. I'll just rush through this. Standing against evolution was a hard thing to do when it was first coming on the scene. Today, they're being proven right on every hand. The preachers were right to take a stand, and the preachers were right when they warned about ragtime and honky-tonk and jazz. They were right. Time has proven them right. They were right in the 50s when they were ridiculed for warning about rock music. Oh, little rock music's not going to hurt anything. They were right about that. And the people that said that television was going to hurt this culture were right. Lester Roloff said there hadn't been a revival since television came on the scene. He was right. And unfortunately, the world sometimes fights harder than we do. Tommy Charles was a Birmingham DJ. I knew the man. And he burned Beatle records in the 60s when they said that they were more popular than Jesus. There should have been a lot of preachers out there with him. I don't know if there were. But he was not a Christian, but he was offended on behalf of Jesus Christ. How about us? And so here's the thing that I'm leaving you with today. We are being offered things that are so powerful, it's really almost impossible not to look away, And the only answer is to not look at all. And a young person's not strong enough to make that decision. That's a decision that's going to fall to us. It's our responsibility to make the hard decisions in our homes that are going to result in what we're trying to do for the Lord. And my research turned up some stuff I really had no idea about. I had no idea how much hardcore pornography is in the gaming industry, how some of these television shows like we talked about, Supernatural and Lucifer and all these things, this stuff's open, available to every kid. And so we really got to rethink what we're making available to them. Thank you very much.